Hi! So I still kind of, feel like garbage, because if you saw my last video, you would know that I was kind of sick for a little while. I'm feeling better, but I'm still not going to be great for this video. But in my last Satanic Sunday video, I discussed my religious beliefs, like my personal beliefs, and I briefly touched on the God and the Goddess. So I'm going to expand on them, who they are, and how I tie them into Satanism. I want to give a quick clarification that the God and the Goddess are pagan deities, and they are not inherently satanic. Paganism and Satanism inherently have nothing to do with each other. It's just for people like me. I tie the two together, so just FYI. I also need to clarify, if you saw my previous video, you already know this, but I do not believe in any of these deities as actual deities, as actual people. Another disclaimer, if you saw my last video, you already know this, but I consider myself to be an agnostic or atheistic Satanic Pagan, meaning that I don't actually believe in the God, the Goddess, or Satan. I more so believe in what they represent, or sort of, I don't know, the vibes. Shut the fuck up! God damn it! Ah! Starting with the Goddess is described as the universal mother, meaning that she either literally or figuratively, depending on how you worship, gave life to all creatures in existence. She is the manifestation of feminine energy, meaning that she represents all goddesses, which means that, you could worship Venus without necessarily betraying the goddess. As she goes throughout her life, she has 3 stages: maiden, her younger self; mother, her motherhood self, her middle-aged self; and crone, her old self. These seasons are also brought out throughout the year with the weather or the seasons. So in the springtime, she is the maiden; during summer, she is the mother; and then in winter, she is the crone. Fall doesn't get one, I guess. She's also broken up into the moon cycles, with waxing moon being the maiden, full moon being the mother, and waning moon being the crone. The goddess has 3 main symbols that represent her: the goddess statue, the goddess symbol, which depicts the moon phases, waxing, full, waning, and of course the moon itself also describes her. Since the goddess is the universal mother, she is often regarded alongside nature, because she creates all the things, but that also means that she is regarded with all aspects of nature, including life and death, so she has dark aspects to her as well. There are many tools or items in Wiccan practices that can represent her. Some would be the cauldron, the cup, 5-petaled flowers, mirrors, necklaces, seashells, Jesus Christ, pearl, silver, and of course there's more. She's also oftentimes associated with the left, or the left side of the altar. If you were to set up an altar, she would be on the left side, the god would be on the right side. So some animals that represent her as well would be the rabbit, bear, owl, dog, cat, goose, cow, dolphin, lion, horse, wren, scorpion, spider, and bee, which are all sacred to her. Now moving on to the god. The god is seen as the sun, or as the horned god. He's represented through both, most often being the horned god. He is the embodiment of masculine energy and is often associated with nature, but in a different way from the goddess. So the goddess creates nature, and therefore she kind of cultivates it in a sense. So she is associated with all life, but she's more so associated with domestic life, or like farming, things like that. Whereas the god is represented through wild animals, because he is created by her, and therefore he is sort of feral in the sense of a lot of wild animals are. So similarly to the goddess, the god also has 3 main symbols that represent him: the god statue, the god symbol, which depicts the horned man, and of course the sun. Since the god is the embodiment of life within nature, he can be represented through ripened harvests, wine, grain, apple orchards, and others. So I know that I said that he's depicted as a wild being, which is still true. He very much so is depicted shown alongside wild animals, because he is kind of wild himself. But when considering him how he is represented, he is a life, right? He is created by her, he embodies life. So that that ties into a full harvest. So that's why he's associated with these domestic things in terms of what he can be viewed through. Does that make sense? I don't know, but if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments, or Twitter, I guess. He also has domains sort of in which he roams in a sense, so that would include untouched forests, deserts, mountains, and the stars, because he himself is a star. He is represented often by creatures such as the bull, dog, snake, fish, stag, dragon, wolf, boar, eagle, falcon, shark, and lizard. He is also represented by the right or the right side of the altar. So like the goddess is on the left, he is on the right. Or I guess if you're watching this, the goddess is on the left, he's on the right. I don't know. Cameras. There are many tools or items in Wicca that can be used to represent him. Those would include the sword, horns, spear, candle, gold, brass, diamond, sickle, arrow, wand, trident, and the knife. So in case if you were like unaware, so like I feel like when we talk about religion, we tend to view it through a very like Abrahamic sense. Like when we think of religious people, we don't really often think of like sexuality. Or if we do, we think about like repressing sexuality, right? Because that's like a pretty significant part of a lot of Christian culture, especially here in America, is like repressing who you are, which is sad, but whatever. The god and the goddess, however, do not do that, and Wiccans definitely do not do that. Trust me, I've met them. So both the god and the goddess represent sex and fertility. This is because they are both essential to life, and they are, you know, they both have life cycles. So I'm going to summarize for simplicity, but so the goddess is the creator of all life, right? So, while she is a maiden, she gives birth or creates all the life on earth, including the god. Meaning that while she is like a mother in her mother stage, all that life grows up and then gets old. So when the harvest comes, or when like the seasons change, the horned god dies or becomes dormant in a sense, and then she is in her crone stage, and then she gets reborn after winter is over, and then she gives birth to all life again, right? So like this is part of the reason why they're sort of broken up between domesticity and wildlife, I guess. And it's because while wildlife, you know, doesn't usually live throughout the year, or at least like wildlife is usually born in the spring and it dies later on towards winter, because that's just kind of how it is. Meanwhile, domestic life, like your cattle, your livestock, things like that, you take care of them, so they live through the winter and get to see the new year. And, you know, she's just reborn to continue the cycle over and over again. But yeah, you can also see this in the fact that the horned god is not really seen as a creator of life in the same sense that the mother is, or the goddess is. He's sort of seen as like someone who is created to experience life. And then he does that, and then he dies, and then he gets reborn again, and then he experiences life, and then he dies, and he starts all over again. Whereas the goddess sort of like, even though she goes through these stages, she's still kind of like the same continuous being, because she doesn't really experience death, you know? Which is like dark. But the goddess is dark. She has dark aspects to her, so I guess it makes sense. And I also want to clarify that, like, when I say that the goddess is the manifestation of feminine energy and that she's associated with domestic life, I'm not trying to say that, like, you know, a woman's place is in the home, you know? I'm not trying to say that. I'm trying to say that, like, she is the cultivator of life. She is the one who brings it about, and she is the one who, like, takes care of it in that sense. So, yeah, I'm not trying to be, like, misogynistic or anything. And mind you, there are many interpretations of the god and the goddess. This is just how I interpret them. So, you know, fucking be nice. So now let's get on to Satan and how I fit Satan in with the god and the goddess. So, it actually can be summed up pretty easily. So, the god, right, masculine energy. The goddess, right, feminine energy. They both have separate sides of the altar that they're both on. So for me personally, I think it makes sense for someone or something to be in the middle in a sense, or maybe outside of that. As a non-binary person, that just kind of makes sense for me. I don't know why. I like spectrums. So for me personally, that is where I fit Satan. So a lot of times when we think of Satan, we think of Baphomet. Think of like this image right here, you know. We think of like a horned guy, kind of has boobs, and like whatever else. This is why if you notice, like if you watch a lot of like crazy conservative people, they always like try to say that Baphomet, or a lot of them try to say that like Baphomet is this transgender god that all the transgenders worship, and they're going to turn your kids into Satan worshipping transgenders. That's part of the reason why they think Baphomet is like a transgender god. It's because Baphomet has sex characteristics of both men and women. Which like I don't really get, because like he's got a goat head. I don't really think about like, I see, what gender identity could I assign to this mythical creature, you know? It's weird. And that also plays into the importance of autonomy that I talked about, you know? Like, the god and the goddess are both manifestations of energy. And of course, I believe that Satan isn't actually real, but Satan is important to the self. It's your own person. And so having Satan depicted as like an actual thing and being its own thing and something in between and sort of unique in that sense, I don't know, makes sense to me. So yeah, that's how I fit Satanism in, is basically like in terms of the energy that they both represent, because again, I don't believe in the actual deities, feminine, masculine, and then whatever mess is in between, I guess, is Satan in that aspect. So yeah, in terms of like my practice, there are certain things that I use to represent Satan, similarly to how there are things that represent the god and the goddess. So for those, I use the pentagram, obviously, the color red, specifically like a darker red, the color black, Baphomet, like imagery of Baphomet, lotus pods, and whatever else I think represents Satan to represent him. It's kind of like, that's the fun thing about Wicca. That's the fun thing about Wicca, is that it's kind of like up to you, because it's not a real like organized religion. It's just sort of like, do your own thing, which I really appreciate, and I will do my own thing. Thank you very much. And the same thing can be said about Satanism. Satanism is very much so focused on the self, which means that you get to sort of make your own rules. So like, you know, makes sense. Thank you for watching. I know that this is relatively like short in comparison to a lot of my other videos, or at least I think it's gonna be. I don't know. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you like, subscribe, comment, share, all that stuff. Have a great day. Hail Satan. I'm so tired.